the trauma is being reenacted today through violence, through domestic violence, through gender-based violence, through sexual violence. It's being reenacted. The trauma that our parents went through is being reenacted.
So how you doing, Sis Jubes?
I'm doing not too bad.
But I know you and close family friend, and you are currently in the States completing your PhD.
Correct.
But before we even get to PhD and now we're in the States and what life looks like today,
Yeah.
bring us a little bit into the backstory of Juba, where she comes from, who she is.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So my name is Juba Khuzwayo.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Exactly. When my brother posted on my birthday on Facebook, he said, "Happy birthday to my sister, Juba Khuzwayo." And be like, really? Is that your name? We didn't know that was your name. Such a beautiful name.
Beautiful name.
Yeah. So I don't use it because during the time of apartheid, when we grew up,
Sure.
the apartheid government rather opened up schools for people who look like you and me to go to these multiracial schools.
Sure.
So when I went there, they were just butchering and massacring my name. And being a shy girl, Khuzwayo. Wow. Being a shy girl, I was like, they'll call me Kathy, they'll call me Kethy, all sorts of names. Like my high school and primary school classmates don't know Juba.
Yeah.
They don't know all the strange names, Kethy, Keto, and I just decided, let me just go with Juba. Easier and so forth. And you can imagine the teacher calling on like a roll call, doing a roll call, and then calling that name in front. And being a shy little girl, I was like, always just, I felt embarrassed and humiliated, and I would hear giggles from people. And I just thought, you know what, let me just go with my easy name and just stick to Juba. But now that I'm in the States, I would make sure that people know who I am. Because,
but is it not worse?
Hey?
Is it not worse? Them trying to pronounce Khuzwayo?
I think there's a consciousness now. There's a consciousness and there's an intentionality around calling it right. I have a chaplain. Her name is Dr. Dillis Brooks. And
love it.
She makes it a point.
Love it.
That knowing now about me and my history, she makes it a point that she tells people that her name is Khuzwayo and she's Jamaican, but she's able to call the name.
That's so crazy, Sis Jubes, because I would literally just having this conversation a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was making the argument. So first, there's a huge thing. We live in a global village, yes, true.
Yes.
And my one lecturer, while I was busy doing completing my master's, he always makes this argument of modernity and says modernity and how basically modernity is seen to ensure that you can achieve great economic success in our globalized world today.
Sure.
But then he says, then you look at countries like Nigeria. If you go to Nigeria today, they are dressed in their African attire, the attire that is specific to them, where they come from as a people, but they've managed to still achieve a level of economic success.
Sure.
So then he basically pins this idea and he says, well, modernity versus conservatism. And he says, well, do we have to forget about who we are and where we come from to achieve a level of success in this global world that we now live in today?
Exactly.
And my argument is, no, I don't think we have to forget. And that's what I'm hearing from me. It's like, yeah, guys, we live in a global world. It's a diverse world, but we still need to be inclined with who we are, where we come from, as much as want to learn the new languages or the new ways of doing things, whatever the case might be. So it's nice to hear that there are people on the other side and they are making an intentional effort to say, no, but who are you? I want us to have the conversation of trauma at an individual or personal level. But then I also want us to remember an interesting conversation we once had, and you brought in the link of trauma from a community perspective and the impact that has at a macro level. So I want us to sort of look at it. But before we get there, very, very, very briefly, I know that people, community, service are a big part of your work, what you're engaged and involved in. Why? What? When in your times of introspection and reflection, do you think that there's something that led you to that? Does that stem from something? Does it come from somewhere?
Yeah. So I grew up in a township north of Durban called Guamashu Township.
Love it.
Yeah. It was very violent during the apartheid days. And I'm a child of the 80s, so it was very violent that time. Going to school, there was always political drama happening, whether it was necklacing of someone. They had what we call tire necklacing, where they put a tire around your neck and start, they would light up the tire and then they'll burn people alive. And they would immediately just say, oh, this one was an informer, was a police informer. I remember hiding under beds. I remember packing, going to a community hall in a colored area. It was rough times. I remember stayaways when we couldn't go to school. You had two major political parties, the ANC, the IFP at loggerheads.
Yeah.
And you'd get the ANC saying, don't go to school. And then next day you hear the IFP coming and saying, go to school, carrying traditional weapons, the others carrying guns and so forth. So it was a very, very volatile time, And also there was just instabilities in families. I remember the community I grew around in, there was always family fights, alcohol, substance abuse. There was just always drama. In his families. And later on, I heard from my grandparents that it's people who were relocated from an informal settlement called Mkumbane.
Okay.
And they inherited this culture from that area because of the conditions that were there. Culture of violence, culture of substance abuse, just a lot of dehumanization happened, the raping of women and, just the abuse in families. So there was a lot of instability at a personal level, but also at a community level.
Yeah.
And I saw people treating each other in unjust ways in families, but also in society. And I had I first went into marketing, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I first went into marketing. And we had, it was called Natal Technicum then.
Yeah.
And immediately when I was there, I was like, marketing products and so forth. This is not really my area.
Yeah.
I remember doing a course in consumer behavior. That was a little bit more interesting. And I think that moment for me being in that university and learning about, what I was studying and also a bit about myself and the context. Because when you're at varsity, you hear a lot of conversations about societal issues. You're already a little bit mature and so forth. And for me, that was a moment of deciding. It was at varsity, but also there was a lot of instability at home with my family. My mom was in an abusive relationship. And I felt, I remember asking myself, why do people treat each other badly? And I said, no, I want to go and study psychology and learn more about human beings and their behavior and what drives people's actions. And that's really where the journey started.
You said something you said that you were very interested to realize why people do what they do, what drives human behavior at a very high level. Maybe what are one or two or three things in your time of research and studies that you think are key to what drives human behavior?
Good question. I think what is coming up, and I'm gonna, quote things from really my field and my experience, what I've seen.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of things that have happened the first 7 years of our lives is critical. How the caregivers, those who were close to you, how they cared for you, how they responded to your needs, how they affirmed or not affirmed you. how they encourage self-esteem or not encourage self-esteem, that has a long-lasting impact in terms of how you show up in relationships in general. This is what I've seen. And we've found that people who are hurt, they hurt others.
Yeah.
And you trace the history, it comes from childhood adversity. Something happened within the 7 critical years of their lives, or something happened in their childhood that informed how they, because that's a critical age where the child is developing, and developing mentally. You're learning about the world, how the world is, how the world is framed. And at that critical phase, if there's no foundation, psychological, emotional, spiritual foundation for a child, you're sitting on a time bomb. And it's not all doom and gloom, that because parents make mistakes.
Yes.
And we grow up in environments which are volatile. There's situations beyond the control of the home that happen. Like the situation that we grew up in, where even if there's stability in the home, you find that there was instability in the community or the school. There's all this violence.
Sure.
But I think the key is processing that childhood trauma. Okay. It's acknowledging it and processing it and being aware of who you are. Having that self-awareness.
Okay.
So that leads me to the point of number 2, that yes, childhood adversity, but the lack of self-awareness for me is another driver. Not knowing who you are. Not knowing how are you showing up. You find people losing relationships. Someone is on their 4th marriage or their 100th job. They can't keep a job. They can't keep a relationship. They can't manage a home. You find guys in their 40s without any, assets or whatever. It's about that self-awareness, how what happened to you affected you emotionally, psychologically, in terms of how you're showing up in society. So if that is not dealt with, you find that a lot of people are just living their lives, aimlessly, like emotional dwarfs, emotional and psychological dwarfs, who are not aware that they're going through stuff, that you are actually a ticking time bomb emotionally. And then you end up hearing, oh, he's committed suicide. Oh, he's in a mental health hospital or whatever, So it's important that even though those things have happened to us, but that there is some kind of self-awareness process that happens. And this self-awareness is not an event. It's a process. I had to go through my own therapy, and kind of like, because I knew that I I experienced abuse. I experienced, I was in, I experienced abuse as a child. And I was like, how am I showing up? And I got feedback at work, in the family, that this is how you're showing up. And I started personal reflection. And I went to a therapist. And it's not a sin. It's not taboo. You don't have to end up in a mental hospital.
Yeah, let's have that conversation, guys. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Go for therapy. And it's like a sounding board.
Yeah.
Someone helps you, journeys with you and says, okay, this is what happened, but this is how, maybe this is what's going on, and frames it in a very clear and succinct and professional way.
Yeah.
That no, this is what happened to you. This is why you're behaving like this.
Yeah.
And this is what we can do.
Yeah.
To sort of like help you move forward from this experience.
So you've mentioned, Sis Jubes, you said feedback, which I think is critical.
Yes.
Guys, we need to be able to receive constructive feedback, and you need to be in a position to receive it. And then you said therapy. What are some of the things that we can do to become more self-aware and to begin to look inward and address some of these? What are some things that we can do?
I think from my and I like coding what I have done. For me, it's feedback has really helped.
Yeah,
feedback has really been the feedback from my mother, from my siblings, from my colleagues.
Yeah.
We had a session at work called the Johari window.
Okay.
The 4 panes. I don't know if you know about that tool, but it's a communication tool.
Okay.
Which says there's an open window, there's a blind window, there's a dark window, and then there's just that empty window. And this is a communication tool for feedback.
Yeah.
Which is about saying that there are things open to me that are open to you. You can see the color of my eyes, you can see the color of my hair. But then there are things which are blind to me, but open to you, Some people say, oh, you talk very fast, I've now become conscious, okay, I need to slow down.
Sure.
Because I talk very fast.
Sure.
There are the things which are blind maybe, to me that you see.
Got you.
And then feedback helps. So they put up this tool. And then there's the dark window, things that are blind to you, but open to me. Because maybe it's painful experiences that I went through that I'm not ready to share. And those are informing how I show up.
How you show up.
How I show up, yeah. And then there's this window, which is like this, it's not called an open window, but it's like, I forgot what it's called, but it's like this, just a window for potential.
Okay.
Which only God, which you don't know, things that you don't know, and that God doesn't even, that God probably knows that you don't know about yourself. Your hidden potentials.
Hey.
I think it's called the hidden window, actually, I got the name. So it's hidden. So it's just this window of potential. Things that this window where it's just potential, and only God knows your true potential. You don't even know, and others don't even know their true potential. So they'd put up this tool, and my boss, a clinical psychologist, is very cautious, and she would say, give people then the positive feedback, and then give them the negative feedback, but sandwich the negative feedback
within the positive.
Within the positive, like a sandwich.
Which is
positive, and then negative in between.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. And the whole day you'd hear colleagues, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, would book this nice venue, and then would go in groups of 2.
Yeah.
And the whole day, all your colleagues, let's say maybe there are 30.
Yeah.
You'd be hearing positive and negative feedback from your colleagues.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, and if 30 people tell you that, oh, but you're rude, you don't know how to speak, or you're moody, or whatever,
then chances are
it's going to improve your level of self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
So those kinds of things, of sessions that we had at work, it improved my level of social, of personal awareness. That, oh, okay, this is who I am. So there needs to be safe spaces created.
Yeah, I like that.
At work or at home, whereby people can have these healing conversations.
I like that. Breen Brown
healing conversations
calls them courageous spaces.
Yeah, courageous spaces.
Yeah.
To have honest but empathic conversations. And I think those spaces, whether in the workplace or in the family or in church, they encourage authenticity. They encourage authenticity for people to go back to who they are. And
I guess just healing.
Yeah, they encourage that healing.
That self-awareness is those steps that we need to take to heal.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the question of just trauma.
Yeah.
First of all, how would you describe trauma?
So a lot of literature is coming up now about trauma, but the standard that people have agreed on so far is that it's an event that brings about horror and fear and feelings of helplessness. And what is coming up in trauma studies is it's not just an event, but it's a lived experience. That the trauma stays on, that horrific, terrifying, fear-driving event that leads you to feelings of helplessness stays on, even beyond the experience, even beyond the event. The experience lives on, even beyond the event. So it could be domestic violence, prolonged and repeated exposure. It could be bullying. It could be community violence.
Yeah.
So, yeah, It could be an accident.
Yeah.
It could be floods.
Yeah.
So any event that you frame as something life-threatening, something that brings about horror and fear and helplessness, and it's not just an event, but a lived experience.
That experience continues.
Would
you think it's a fair statement to then say that everybody has gone through, experienced some kind of a traumatic event, or do you think that's stretching it?
I think it would be a fair statement, especially in the context of South Africa.
Okay.
Because contexts differ.
Power.
I think most people, I would qualify that and say most people have gone through some kind of traumatic experience. I've heard friends like in America who say, "Oh, I've not heard anything terrible happening in my life."
Yeah.
So you will find people saying that their childhood was great and this didn't happen and so forth, But I think the majority of us have gone through something painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we're also learning that is not, the key is not just about the event, but how it's framed, how you are framing it. Okay. If that event for you experience it as life-threatening,
power,
as fearful, as bringing about feelings of horror.
My interpretation of
your interpretation of the event is the key, how it's framed. So someone could frame grief, for example, as something very traumatic. Someone could frame divorce as something very, very traumatic and life-threatening. Someone could frame, bullying and all sorts of other things. Bullying, floods, earthquakes, and so forth. So there's different types of experiences, but the key from the literature, what is emerging, is that how is that event framed by you, the experience of the event. And maybe another point that I need to make to qualify is that not everyone who goes through a traumatic experience will be traumatized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go deeper.
So some people have, like we all have stressors and protective factors.
Okay.
So stresses would be, maybe a childhood adversity, would be an environment of unsafety at home, could be maybe financial issues that you're experiencing, economic crisis and so forth, that could exacerbate the impact of the trauma. But some people have got strong protective factors.
Okay.
They've got strong intrinsic values that we discussed. They've got strong supportive families, strong religious institutions.
And as a result, that circumvents or mitigates or helps it not to become
the impact.
Okay.
Mitigates the impact of the trauma. Because how a trauma lands on us, it's about not just the event, but the length of the event,
everything around it,
the nature of the event, the exposure to it. And that frames, the depth of that trauma.
Power.
So not everyone, you hear people going through stuff. Oh, I was robbed and whatever. And someone just bounces back without having any nightmares maybe, or having any issues that, impair their on their daily functioning. Mm-hmm. They go on and live normal lives because of the strong protective factors. Yeah. So it shouldn't just be assumed that because you've gone through a trauma,
you are traumatized.
But most people are traumatized, and it's normal as well. I think that's also important to say, that because many people go through those experiences, whether it's a flood or divorce or it's domestic violence, and they start having certain symptoms, whether it's nightmares or flashbacks or body pains, or some start eating a lot, or some start losing weight, and they start feeling that they're going crazy. So I think it's important as well to share with people that it's normal to go through those experiences. It's normal to have those reactions. In fact, what we say as trauma counselors is that if you don't go through those reactions, it's like maybe it's not really it's not really normal not to go through those experiences. So it's normal to have those reactions.
Yeah.
Many people who've gone through terrible circumstances will have these reactions, which are normal for something terrible and painful, that you have gone through.
Yeah.
So you're not going crazy. It's a normal response to an abnormal event.
Yeah.
It's a normal response.
Yeah. And the reason why, Sis Troops, for me, the conversation of the psychology conversation, the trauma conversation, that conversation is a critical conversation. Because I always say, from a perspective of leadership, right? If you are in whatever space, if you're in the corporate space and position of leadership, if you're building your own organization, whatever the case might be, the NGO space, government, whatever you engaged in is either can only grow or be as great as you are. So if I'm limited, you inherently going to limit the growth of the thing. Absolutely. So to what you said, how I show up is going to determine all these other factors. Correct. The success of my business, the success of my team, how I lead my team, how I engage with my people, whatever the case might be. So then it becomes important to be self-aware, because that means that I need to be a better person. Absolutely. Better leader. Correct. But there's steps that need to be taken to achieve that. And for me, which I'm really getting from this conversation, what I think is so important is the idea of being self-aware.
It's very critical. The self-awareness is critical. And also our awareness as a collective. Because it's not just, there's two types mainly of trauma categories that psychologists are now just agreeing on, which is, the single traumatic event, a dangerous event that happens to you.
Got you.
And maybe it's a rape, or it's just a single event that happened.
Sure.
Right? Or you've been in an accident.
Sure.
But then there is the continuous trauma, the prolonged exposure to a situation, whether it's community violence, whether it's bullying, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual violence. So many of these types of traumas are framed around these two. And I think what is critical as well, not just as individuals to be aware of ourselves, but to be aware of the context of the country we're living in. Okay. That as a collective, we have what we call historical trauma. We have transgenerational trauma. Collective trauma. So we have collective trauma, we have historical trauma, and we have transgenerational trauma.
Yeah.
As a society, this is our heritage from our parents, from our great-grandparents, from our grandparents. This is the heritage we've inherited. So things that we may not directly have witnessed, but we are living the trauma. The trauma is being reenacted.
Lived experience today,
Yeah. The trauma is being reenacted today through violence, through domestic violence, through gender-based violence, through sexual violence. It's being reenacted. The trauma that our parents went through is being reenacted. So we have these types of traumas that we've experienced as a collective, as a people, with our history, and it's being passed on from one generation to the other. And this is really also the focus of my PhD, is kind of like delineating the etiology and the symptomatology of these different types of traumas, and to say, what does historical trauma mean? What does this collective experience of trauma mean? What does this transgenerational experience of trauma mean? And how is it manifesting? How does this psychologists call it the multiple wound phenomenon.
Okay.
How does it manifest in society? So what we are finding in literature is that in South Africa, we have all these types of traumas. We have the historical trauma because of what we went through under apartheid. We have collective trauma as well, what we went through under apartheid, being targeted as a race and being told that we are nothing. You are monkeys. You can't do anything. This self-doubt and hitting at the core of who we are. So we have that shared collective trauma experience. And transgenerationally, this trauma is being passed on. Because even though you lived in a different environment, in a different context or era with your parents, but you can't tell me that as a Black man in South Africa, you're not experiencing systemic racism. You're not experiencing discrimination. You're not experiencing self-doubt and being mistreated and so forth, regardless of the political freedom. So what we're seeing in the country is that our forefathers hand on or passed on to us a legacy of freedom, but they did not deal with the wounds of the past.
And that's so powerful because you touch
so that awareness is critical, not just the self and the family, but
also
the broader societal awareness of what we share.
Yeah.
Our collective, our shared
experience.
Yeah. As a community.
Powerful. It would be great to have another conversation and just go deeper on the different elements. You mentioned all these different types of traumas that we've experienced. There's a plethora of them. And I'm sure even to this next question, there's probably a myriad of different ways to address this. But I'm going to ask you just high level, in your view, how do we overcome? Because we are facing so many challenges as a country, as a people, as a community. What are some of the steps that we can take to overcome, to address these issues, that we can begin to live out that hidden potential that, in my view, we haven't even scraped the surface or touched?
Yeah, it goes back. I was listening to an interview by my colleague, Dr. Namfundo Mohapi. She's a director of the Mental and Wellness Center here in Johannesburg. She's a clinical psychologist. And she spoke in an interview about the issue that what is emerging from our trauma studies is that what we experienced in the past matters. The wound that we experienced, it is there. It is living on. It is being reenacted in the violence, in the lootings that we experience, the gender-based violence, the rapes and so forth. Every day there's like a murder. And I'm told now it's like every 8 seconds or something, a woman is raped, you know. In one court, I was looking at the police statistics. They were saying 10,200 women experience intimate partner violence. And I think they were killed, those women as well.
Wow.
So it's first that awareness that wound, that multiple wound phenomenon matters. And if it's not dealt with, it is going to sabotage the very efforts that the freedom fighters have put in place for us. You know, they're going to sabotage anything. They're going to sabotage our economy. It's going to sabotage our political freedom. It's going to sabotage our families. And as you said, anything and everything. We saw in the looting. We see also now in the corruption. It's a different face of trauma.
But it is an aspect of it.
Yeah, it's a different face of trauma. Playing out. You know, that moral erosion, because the impact of trauma, and maybe another time we're going to go deeper into that what does this wound do psychologically?
Yeah.
What does it do behaviorally? How does it manifest spiritually and so forth? So this moral erosion of corruption that we see, it's a part of manifestation, different facets of trauma. And it's not about people immediately think that, we're trying to justify things. No, it's important to understand what is happening. It's important to understand the wound and the brokenness.
Yeah.
That this is the level of brokenness. So I think for me, that's one thing, is awareness. And briefly, high level, research is emerging about healing spaces.
Okay.
That we need to train, not just psychologists, but we need to train pastors. We need to train church leaders. We need to train business people on, creating these healing spaces.
Power.
Whereby we can have conversations about what did that experience do to you of growing up in an abusive family? What did this experience do to you of being raised as a Black woman who was told that you were nothing, you were a monkey? What did it mean for you to be relocated and being taken away from the graves of your ancestors? What did that experience mean to you? Of being raped, of being starved food. I worked with young men who were saying that the form of violence they experienced is being starved food, being told they were nobodies. That's the violence that they experienced in their families growing up. So we need to have these healing spaces.
Yeah.
And this is one healing space that you've created here.
Yeah.
To have honest conversation.
Yeah.
Regardless of where we are, regardless of the sector, we need these healing spaces, because who we are informs how we show up.
Come on.
in society. We are seeing that. You see a high-level businessman owning stuff and being involved in some kind of corruption. We see a high-level doctor I was watching on YouTube being involved in corruption, basically. And you're like, but you have a degree, you have this.
Yeah.
And I started reflecting that perhaps something happened to this girl that told her that she's a nobody. Of course, on the surface, like, oh, Tandizi.
Yeah.
You know, that's the surface issues.
Yeah.
But the deeper issues, if she would go into therapy, you'd find that those issues are informed by some kind of trauma that...
And they can be addressed. They must be addressed.
That she thought she's a nobody, even though she's achieved so much in her heart, intrinsically.
So there's something, but it's within
no self-value,
yeah.
no value inside that I'm a somebody.
Yeah.
I still need to acquire, in order to feel like I'm a somebody.
Yeah.
I'm still a nobody.
Sure.
So there are deeper issues going on.
I'm really picking up the importance of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Being intentional with going on to a healing journey.
Yeah.
And
also therapy.
And then I was going to say, and then it's okay.
Yeah.
To acknowledge that I need to go on to this process. I need to have this process and let that process play out.
Go for therapy. It's not a sin to go for therapy, guys. Go for therapy.
Do it, guys. Go for therapy.
It helps. It helps.
Juba, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
My heart is warm, thankful, filled with gratitude at this moment.
Awesome.
It's been a great conversation.
Wow.
And I hope to have a few more.
Yes.
Because I do think, and I always say, we always scrape the surface with these issues. There's so much more depth that we can go into.
So much more depth.
And so much more value that we can add to the community. We really that's all we're trying to do on the Impvct Podcast is build this community.
Wow.
To add value to people's lives in the space of business leadership and development. And I think that we've definitely achieved that today.
Great work. Great work.
Thank you.
Great work. And thank you for creating this healing space.
Super. Thank you so much. And again, like we always say, like, comment, share, get involved, get engaged with our platform. We want to build this community. Tell us how we can add more value to you. And just keep in touch with us. And we hope that we can continue to add more value in your life from a perspective of business leadership and development, because that's what we're all about. That's what we do here on the Impvct Podcast. Until next time.